Welcome to the most common influencer marketing mistakes and how to avoid them. My name is Matt Gibson. This is a rebroadcast, an abridged version, a little bit shorter, of a talk that I gave at ATM this year, Arabian Travel Market. And I'm going to go over the main points of my talk again for those who were present when I did the presentation and for anybody else who's interested in this. So, let's get started. This talk was done on behalf of the Professional Travel Bloggers Association. For those of you not familiar, the PTBA is a non-profit organization. It is dedicated to helping industry and influencer members to work together better through education, networking, and the dissemination of best practices among the industry. And we have an influencer search engine that enables the industry members to search the influencer members according to their audiences and according to their followings. It also allows the influencers to search our industry members for people who might be a good match to work with. Like I said, my name is Matt Gibson. I am now the outbound president of the PTBA. I'm also the CEO of a digital marketing agency based in Hong Kong called Upthink. We do a lot of work with travel influencers, and I am an award-winning travel photographer and blogger. I've been doing this for quite a long time. At ATM, I was meant to co-present with Nicholas Montemaggi, and he unfortunately was too sick to be there, but I wanted to put him in here anyways because he's a really great guy and he really knows his stuff. He's the CMO for iAmbassador, which you can find at iambassador.net. They are a company that also specializes in working with travel influencers. If you're not hiring us, I highly recommend that you go and talk to those guys. He has an MBA from the Bologna Business School, and he is formerly the International Online Media Manager for Emilia-Romagna Tourist Board in Italy. Now, I think we've all heard that influencers are very valuable if they are worked with properly. And they are. So that's why we're here today. According to Jeffrey Graham, VP of Market Research at Twitter, influencers can be an ROI machine. Of course, he has to say that. He's, works at Twitter. But we wouldn't be here if we didn't all believe that to some degree. According to a recent study by Google, this one caught me by surprise when I was actually doing my research. 4 in 10 millennial subscribers say that their favorite creator understands them better than their friends do. According to a Twitter and Analytics joint study in 2016, 40% of respondents to that study said that they had purchased an item online after seeing it used by an influencer. And according to Focusrite, who I always hold in very high regard, the research does indicate that influencer UGC gets results. So I think we've all heard many times over that influencer marketing is very useful. It does get very good results. But at the same time, I think we have all heard some horror stories. The media has them. I'm sure some of your friends have them, about things with influencers going terribly wrong. Now, these good results are definitely possible, and so are those horror stories, and that is why we decided we wanted to put together this talk about the most common mistakes in influencer marketing to help you and help everybody out there just to avoid the most common mistakes that result in horror stories and provide a little bit of information about the practices that lead to those success stories that you've heard about and would like to replicate. So there is a lot of value, but a lot of people do struggle with influencer marketing, especially when they first start. And really, the problem is that, like anything, it's it's a very nuanced thing to do. There are a lot of details involved that people who don't have experience with it are going to overlook. There are a lot of just hidden pitfalls, hidden mistakes that people are not going to see coming that they commonly make when they first start influencer marketing. And again, that's why we are doing this talk, is to help you avoid those main mistakes. And to be honest, most of them are very, very simple, easy to make mistakes that are almost result from common sense. So we're going to go through those for you. So here are the things we're going to talk about. The 5 most common mistakes are poor budget allocation for influencer campaigns, focusing on the wrong influencers for your campaigns, a lack of having a clear strategy and goals, unclear expectations and agreements for the campaign and with the influencers, and focusing on the wrong KPIs, both when vetting influencers and when executing campaigns. If you get past those 5 main pain points that are the biggest stumbling blocks for most people when they first try influencer campaigns, you're going to be at the top 10% of people doing influencer campaigns right now, if you can just get those particular things right. So let's get into this. Let's start with, though, for those who are a little bit less familiar, what is an influencer? This might seem obvious, but like we're going to find out during this talk, a lot of things that seem obvious maybe aren't quite as obvious as they seem. An influencer is an independent publishing entrepreneur. That makes them very different from a journalist in that they work for themselves. They don't have a magazine or newspaper signing their paycheck. They have a large skill set that has to do with marketing themselves, that has to do with marketing their content to their audience, that has to do with helping you market yourself to their audience. They're quite different from journalists, which is what they are normally compared to. And when we talk about influencers, I'm talking about people who just publish on any platform online. Okay, we're talking about people publishing content. It doesn't really matter what the platform is. Some people prefer to use a blog where they post photos and they write stories. Some people prefer Twitter, where they write just short little blurbs and have conversations more. Some people obviously prefer Instagram. It's pretty popular. YouTube for those who are into video. Now, these people are all influencers. They just use different platforms and different formats to get their message out. But the same thing among all of them is that they are independent publishers. They're creating content that's distributed on platforms on the internet to create a following, which then is of value to brands like yourself. And that is how they make their money. And it's important to remember that this is their business. It is not, for at least the people that we work with when we're talking about professionals, it is not a hobby. And that brings us to mistake number 1, budget allocation. You do truly get what you pay for. And we have seen cases where people, and they obviously get what they pay for when they're asking for free work. We also see people who do end up paying too much because they don't know the market value of what they're purchasing. And they end up having a bad experience as well because they're overpaying for a product. So here are the mistakes that people often make when they're doing influencer campaigns in travel. Now, destinations who bring in a group of influencers will often treat it like a press trip. And I can't stress enough that that is incorrect. Influencers should not be thought of the same way that journalists are. Some people will treat free travel as payment for it to an influencer. Again, I cannot stress enough that these people are making a living. Well, at least the professionals are. If you would like to work with somebody who's not a professional, I don't recommend it. But free travel is not payment except in the most unique cases when people want to go to an extremely desirable destination. I know a lot of people would go to Antarctica and consider that travel payment. But 99% of destinations are not that attractive. And they should pay their influencers. And I will talk to you about why it's actually going to return better value than not paying them. And of course, people are often hesitant to invest in something that they've never invested in before, that they're new to. Everybody is risk averse, and nobody wants to put a lot of money into something they've never succeeded at in the past. So the things that you do want to do are, instead of treating an influencer like a journalist on a press trip, you do have to consider this more like you are hiring a contractor, like you're hiring somebody to come in and fix your sink, like you're hiring a photographer to take photos of your hotel. You are hiring somebody to do a job because they are a professional with experience and they have a track record of doing a good job and not messing it up. Travel is just an expense, the same way when you travel to trade shows like Arabian Travel Market in Dubai. It's a cost of doing business, and that is a cost of doing business with influencers. And you need to invest appropriately. Now, that doesn't mean that you always have to spend a huge amount of money. At the end, I'm going to show you a very low budget case study that I personally took part in. But what it means is you do have to be willing to invest and, be realistic about that investment. There is no endeavor in the world that you can go into trying to cheap out your way through it and expect to be successful. Influencer marketing is no different. So the benefits of paying influencers are many. First benefit that you get, and we kind of contrast this usually with the benefits you get from something like a press trip where you bring a group of journalists, or a fam trip, is you get guaranteed coverage. When you are paying an influencer for a service, you get to negotiate with them the amount of coverage and what that coverage is probably going to look like to a degree. That influencer will want editorial control, but moving on to the second one, you do get to discuss with them your brand messaging. And if this influencer is concerned about working with you and they want to do a good job, which most professionals do, they're going to work with you to make sure that their messaging is on brand for shout at that time. If the influencer doesn't feel that they are able to appropriately convey your brand message or authentically convey your brand message, that it doesn't match with their audience or with their style, then any professional influencer will then tell you that, and they will probably turn down your offer to work together because it doesn't look like a good fit. So you will get a guarantee of coverage. You are going to get to work with that influencer to make sure that your message is on brand, that it's going out in. They will have editorial control, but they will be able to massage that message you're trying to get in a way that's going to appeal to their audience. You're also going to have control over the timing of publication, which is key, because you're going to want usually these campaigns to go out when people are deciding on their trip that they're going to take next year, when they're shopping around for their summer vacation with their family. You're going to want this to go out to the right audience during their buying season. That's normally when people want to. You have no control over that with a publication. You do have control over that when you're hiring influencers to help you. And you get owned media assets. This one is usually a bonus, but it's a very good value when you add this onto a campaign. So if you have a professional photographer influencer who's extremely good at Instagram coming out, it's usually a very smart idea to work with them to put together some collateral that you will own after, some photos for your Instagram, or if it's a good vlogger, to help you put together some drone footage of your resort or your destination, something that you're going to own, that you're going to be able to use in the future for future marketing campaigns, so that at the end of this, you didn't just get some posts on social media, on blogs, and on YouTube, but you're also going to own a bunch of media assets that you would normally have to pay a professional to produce anyways. This is what makes it very beneficial, very cost effective, is that you're sort of getting all of these benefits at the same time for one price, and when you bundle these services together, and compare them to buying those services separately, the value becomes very good. Mistake number 2 is focusing on the wrong influencers. And again, now these are things that people really naturally do. They seem to make sense on the surface. But once you actually get into the details, they don't make sense for an influencer campaign. So, for example, most people assume that more traffic is better on a website. That's not necessarily true. They assume that more followers that an influencer have is better. Again, this is not necessarily always true. And they assume that the size of an influencer's audience equals influence. The size of their reach equals influence. Again, this is not necessarily true, but these are very common assumptions people make, and they're totally understandable. But here's what we really need to focus on when we're looking at influencers, okay? The first thing you want to look for is a brand fit. Doesn't matter how many followers an influencer has, how big their reach is, if they don't fit your brand extremely well, they are not going to be able to communicate your message and have it resonate with their audience in the way that you want them to. So the first thing I would say, anytime you're vetting influencers, you have to look for a really good brand fit. If it's not a good brand fit, I would immediately exclude that person as a possibility to work with, and I would move on to the next person. That is going to be your first deal breaker. Second, you're going to want to find an engaged audience. And you're going to want to look at the real metrics that actually display that. So if you're looking at a website that gets, for example, if you look at a website that gets 1,000 visits per month, just as an easy math example, and you look at a website that gets 100 visits per month, you might assume that the one that gets 1,000 visits per month would be of better value for you. However, if the one that gets 1,000 visits per month has 1,000 pages, it is getting an average of 1 visitor per page. If the website with 10 pages or with 100 visits per month has 10 pages, it's going to get an average of 10 visits per page per month. So, even though it might not look like it on the surface, the website that gets 100 visitors per month would provide you better value if you are paying for real estate on one of those pages. When you are looking at an influencer's audience on Instagram or on other social media, it's a very common mistake to just look at their follower count. Their follower count does not really tell you very much. First, people can buy fake followers, of course, or they could have followers that don't really care about them. If I'm looking at an Instagram influencer, I don't even look at their follower count ever. It's an irrelevant number to me. What I would do is look at their last 20 posts. I would count the number of comments and likes on each post. And then I would look at the average. What is the average number of likes this person gets on a post? That's the average number of people who engage with each piece of content that this person creates. That is a real measure of a person's value and what they're going to bring to you. And now if a person is charging you per post for, say, an Instagram picture, you can take it one step further and you can take their price per post, you can divide it by the number of likes they get on average for a picture and a post on Instagram, and you can find out the estimated cost for every like they will get on a picture for your brand. And using that metric, you can compare two potential influencers in a very good way, even if they're very different sizes. The cost per engagement is a really great metric for comparing two different influencers to making sure that you know on a dollar and cents basis you want to look at their audience and not their following. They're very different things, and it's the engagement that matters. And of course, you're going to want somebody who is an experienced professional. You wouldn't hire a plumber to come and fix your toilet if you didn't know that he could do it. You wouldn't hire a mechanic to work on your very expensive car if you didn't feel confident that he was going to fix it instead of break it. It's the same with influencers. You should make sure that these people have experience, that they have a press kit, that they present themselves professionally. I can't say this enough. Almost so few people ever even speak to influencers before they hire them. They do the whole process by email. Have a meeting with them. Get on Skype. Interview them the same way you would any other contractor that you're ever going to hire. Really, I mean, it seems silly to even say it, but almost nobody does it. And just having a meeting with them so you can talk and make sure you're on the same page, that it's a person you feel like you want to work with, those things are really important. So you want to make sure you're hiring an experienced professional and somebody who you want to work with and that you think you'll work well with. Now, mistake number 3, having a lack of clear strategy and goals. This again is something that happens often when people start doing influencer marketing and, well, they just don't have experience with it. So they're not sure how this fits into their strategy. And they're not sure what are the appropriate goals. So now many influencer campaigns can have less planning, but when I'm talking about this people planning less than 6 months in advance, that's referring to influencer travel campaigns where you are planning an entire trip for the influencers, where you're bringing influencers in. They need to have itineraries that are going to give them activities that will really appeal to their audience, where you're probably bringing in a group of several. Those things take a good amount of time. You're probably going to want to start at least 6 months out if you're planning that kind of campaign. Second is a lack of communication. And like I have said, many people tend to do this by email, and everybody is busy. And I have found that many times, and a lot of influencers will tell you the same, that there is just a lack of communication about details, about specifics, oftentimes. And it's on both parties, the influencer and the company hiring them, to make sure that this part goes well. But you really need to make sure you're communicating well with them so that the process goes smoothly. I mean, that goes for all parts of business, I mean, we all have communications departments in our companies, and there's a reason for that. Mistake number 3 is a lack of amplification. So many people send influencers on trips, or they hire them to create content. They post it on social media. They tag the company who hired them in their post, and that company doesn't do anything with it, which is half of the point, is that these people are creating content that you can go and you can reshare with your own audience to reinforce this brand message that you're putting out there. So, influencers are out there working with brands, tagging the destination that they're in, they're tagging the hotel they're staying at, and the brand is silent, not resharing that content with their audience, which seems like a very obvious thing to do, but they don't make a point of remembering to do it. And it is a very key part to a good influencer campaign. Many people go into this influencer campaigns without a broader plan. It's not a piece of a broader strategy. And in marketing, it really makes sense to have all of the parts working together. It always does. And influencer marketing is no different. It shouldn't be siloed off from your social media strategy. It should work with your social media strategy to help you gain followers, to reach that influencer's audience and try to get them to follow you on your social accounts. It should work to create social credibility and professional testimonials for the product that you're promoting. You're using these people as spokespeople to help communicate a message that you're trying to get out. And you need to have a plan to take the message even farther than the influencer pushes it on their own channels. You need a plan to push that out through your own channels and reuse it. You're buying this product, this content, and just using it once when you have 4 or 5 different ways that you could possibly use it after you've already purchased it just seems simple. It's sort of obvious once you think about it. You have this great content to use. You have multiple ways to use it. And not having a broader plan that takes advantage of that is one of the main things that leads to people being disappointed with their influencer campaigns. finally, not having a measure of success is a real big issue as well, because either people will have unrealistic measures or they just won't even know what to expect because they haven't really tried it before. So you really want, if you're doing a big campaign, you want people to travel to your destination to create content, you're going to need 6 months to a year lead time. Other smaller campaigns are different, but for the bigger ones, I see people approaching influencers 2-3 months out, 6 weeks out, and that's just not sufficient to do it well. You need 6 months to a year, generally speaking. You need influencer participation in the planning. You need to work with them to make this plan, because they're the person who knows their audience. They know what their strengths are. They know what they are good at creating, whether it's video, whether it's short video or long video, whether it's sunset photography or portraits. You know, they know what they're best at, and they know how to really reach their audience. So you have to work with them to design their activities and to design this campaign and to massage this message so that it becomes something that's really powerful for both of you. You need to use strategic promotion to reuse that content that they have created for you. There is no sense in buying that content and then using it once. It's like buying a toaster, making one piece of toast, and then throwing it away. It just doesn't make sense. There are so many other ways that you can use it. Having complementary campaigns running alongside the influencer campaign really makes a lot of sense. I was in one a few years back for Calgary in Canada, where they had a campaign to bring in people for the weekend. They wanted drive-in traffic. So they had me, adventure blogger, come in to do some adventure stuff for the weekend, and they made a video about it. But then they had a food blogger to do one weekend of food stuff. They had a family blogger to do one weekend of family stuff. Went out on all of our social channels to reach these different audiences. And then they've reused that to promote their destination year after year after year. My family lives very close to Calgary. Every year I get a call every spring when it's vacation planning time. And my mom and my aunts, my uncles are seeing those videos pop up on their YouTube. This is how you get the most out of these influencer campaigns. Measurable outcomes, of course, are key. Now, they change from campaign to campaign, but things like video views and the amount of time spent viewing them is something that you can measure. You can also very easily calculate an equivalent advertising value for the amount of time someone has viewed YouTube videos by comparing it to the cost of buying pre-roll YouTube advertising for the same audience. You can very easily measure the value that you have created with an influencer by measuring that. It's a very similar situation for blog posts. Social media posts are not quite as obvious to measure the value, but you want to make sure that you're measuring them on the right terms. You know, you want to be looking mainly at your cost per engagement, generally speaking, making sure it's as low as possible. And as soon as you've compared that across a few influencers, you'll start to get a feeling for what an Instagram like is supposed to be worth and what you want to benchmark that at and what you're trying to achieve and what kind of goals you want to set for the value that you're creating on that platform. These are the outcomes we want to make sure we're measuring so that at the end of the day, we know what we got. And of course, there's the value of any media collateral you've created, such as video that you've purchased from the influencer, which is usually much cheaper than buying it from just a professional videographer, or photography that you've purchased from them. These things are measurable. They have value that you can put on a report, that you can put on your spreadsheet at the end of the day to show that you produced more value for your company than you spent on your budget. Mistake number 4. Having unclear or unrealistic expectations and agreements. So this has 2 parts to it. It has to do with contracts, and it has to do with the expectations that you have going into this. Now, like I mentioned, not meeting a person face-to-face before you hire them, not just with influencers is this wrong. It's just bad practice. Of course you should interview somebody before you meet them. And it's just so surprising how few people do this with influencers. Having unclear deliverables. Again, it seems like an obvious thing to tell somebody when they're doing a job for you, this is what I expect in the job, and list the things that they are going to do for you very clearly so that you. So often, people who are inexperienced at this will just invite an influencer out, maybe pay them, maybe not, and just wait and see what the influencer does afterwards to see what they get. And that's usually a disappointing situation because they didn't know what they should expect. You should always be very clear about what you are asking for when you are working with an influencer. Make a list of it. How many blog posts? How many words and photos are in those blog posts? That should be very clear. How many Instagram posts? How many YouTube videos? How long are those YouTube videos? And then you need to have deadlines so that you know when you're getting those things and the influencer knows when they're expected. Again, this is something that seems so obvious, but so few people do it. And it's just really important for clarity among both parties so that nobody comes out of this disappointed. And of course, not having a contract is very, very common, just an email negotiation of some kind. A contract is so important. I mean, again, you're hiring a contractor. You wouldn't hire a plumber without signing some sort of a contract with them that ensures that they're liable for damages, or that they're insured, and that they're not going to do something other than what they said they would do. And it's no different with influencers. So again, you want collaborative planning. You want to work with the influencer to plan this trip. You want to work with them to make sure the message is right. You want to meet with them so that you know that you are on the same page. You need a clear scope of work. Just like any project on any industry in the world, you need to have a clear scope of work for, so you know that you're going to get what you paid for. You need to have a clear timeline, again, like any project in the world. And you need to have a detailed contract that outlines all of the above so that everybody is very clear, and that if there are disagreements, you can go back to the contract and you can say, this is what we agreed on. If there are disagreements, you have that document to go back to, and it keeps things clear and businesslike and professional, and it goes smoothly. And again, it seems so obvious, but so many people don't do these things, and then things go badly, and they wonder why. And finally, mistake 5, measuring the wrong KPIs. This again is very common. Like I discussed before with a couple of the examples, sometimes it sort of makes sense, common sense, it seems like common sense, but it's actually not the best way. The things that seem like common sense are not the best measures of success. So the biggest numbers are not the best numbers. The most common example is reach. People will always use reach or impressions in reports because it's a very big number, which is impressive. And it's impressive to bosses when you hand off a report to your boss and you had 5 million impressions on Twitter. Unfortunately, that number doesn't mean anything. It means that particular tweet showed up on a certain number of Twitter timelines. Doesn't mean anyone saw it. Doesn't mean they cared about it. Doesn't mean they read it. Doesn't mean they liked it. It has zero correlation to the effect that your campaign had. Now, we all report it. We all include it in our reports, but it is not an important number. The biggest numbers are often the most useless. That's very similar to counting followers. Counting followers is the biggest number an influencer can give you, and it's the biggest number you can use to justify hiring them. And to a degree, that makes sense, and it's a natural thing to do. But it is not the number that is going to predict how much value an influencer is going to return to you. Counting views of content and considering that more important than the response to the content from the audience, again, it's a common mistake. Just counting views. It's an easier thing to count views than to look at the way people responded to the content, but it is not the best way to gauge the effectiveness of the content that was created. And oftentimes, influencer work is not going to result in immediate business inquiries for you. There are exceptions to this. I have seen influencers sell out very expensive tour packages in the past. These things are not impossible, but generally speaking, they take extremely experienced campaign managers with extremely professional influencers and a very, very, very well thought out plan to produce those kinds of results. Most of the time, you are looking at different results that are more top of the funnel, that are reaching new people, that are planting the seed for people to purchase your product or to engage with your brand or to visit your destination. So instead of those things, instead of looking at the biggest numbers, we're looking at indicators of influence. Again, please, if you take one thing away from this, the best indicator of influence is to look at the average amount of engagement that any piece of content gets. If that's a video on YouTube, then you can look at the average amount of time that people are viewing a person's YouTube videos and the average number of people. Now you have a total amount of time that the average video is seen by consumers. That is an indicator of influence. The number of subscribers on a YouTube channel is not. As again, with Instagram, the number of followers a person has on Instagram, more and more as the algorithm changes, has very little bearing on the amount of engagement they're going to produce from their audience. I have seen people with 200,000 followers. I have about 45,000 followers, personally. I was on a campaign last fall, somebody who had 200,000. That person was getting on average about 2,500 likes per post, while I was averaging around 2,000. I had less than 1/4 of the followers of that person, and I was also probably charging about 1/4 of the price for my work. When you break it down, you want to look at how much engagement each piece of content an influencer creates is getting, and how much you're paying for each of those engagements, whether that's seconds of reading on a blog or seconds of video viewing on YouTube or likes on an Instagram post. That is how you can really, really zero in on the value that person's going to bring you. Instead of looking at the vast number of views that a person might get, you really want to focus on the audience impact. Now, the views are important. The time that people spend viewing this content is important. But one of the best things that you can pull out to put in a report at the end of a campaign is all these comments on whatever platform it happens to be where people say, wow, I had no idea about that place. I didn't know that Kyrgyzstan was so amazing. I want to go there next year. I was on a Kyrgyzstan campaign last year. Part of my reporting to them was a list of 5 or 10 of these comments from people who said, wow, I can't believe this. I never knew about that place before, but now that I've seen what you did, I want to visit that place. I would like to do that as soon as I can. That is a great proof of the value of this. It's anecdotal. It's not a huge number, but those kinds of comments are key for reporting to show the impact that you can and are having. You need to focus on the long-term benefits, because usually influencer marketing lives in the same area very much as branding. Similar to commercials on television, similar to public relations campaigns. You know, Nike does not put up a Super Bowl ad and then try to count the sneakers that they sold from that ad. They're branding. It makes sense in many ways to just consider the long-term benefit of this branding exercise. Of course, alongside all of the other benefits that we've talked about, such as the production of collateral, the accruement of more followers on your own social channels, email subscribers to your marketing newsletter. All of these things are benefits, but overall you also have to consider it in the long term as part of your overall, long-term marketing program. So, that said, those being the 5 major mistakes that people make, I would like to show you one case study of one campaign that turned out very well for me and for the client. Unfortunately, since Nick was sick when we did this, he wasn't able to present his. I wanted to do one small campaign and one large campaign presented by Nick, but he was sick, so we just have the small campaign to show you. This was pretty tiny. So, this was for Kalispell, Montana. Probably a place you've never heard of. It is not that far from where I grew up in British Columbia, and I called this way out in the middle of somewhere. So when we met before the campaign, Kalispell wanted to really focus on not what's in our small town of Kalispell, because Kalispell is a small town in Montana, it's a very nice town, but they wanted to focus on the things around it, because it was sort of in the middle of a bunch of great things, such as Glacier National Park, which you see pictured here, one of the most famous national parks in the U.S., has 3 great world-class ski hills, all within driving distance. It has one of the largest lakes in North America, just down the road, 30-minute drive away. Okay, these were the things that they wanted people to know is not what was really in Kalispell as much as what was around Kalispell. So I titled it Way Out in the Middle of Somewhere. When we did this, it was their first try at influencer marketing, and I was really impressed with how open they were. I was the first influencer they ever brought. It was a one-person campaign. They contacted me about 4 months ahead of time. They were very willing to discuss the best way to approach it. So overall, I think we had 3 good telephone meetings of about 45 minutes to an hour each, discussing what we were looking for both out of it, what their message was, the activities they had available that I could try, the ones that I thought would resonate the most with my audience while still expressing their message. We negotiated the deals of the trip, the specifics, the number of days, the flights, the times, all that sort of thing. We agreed on a set of deliverables that I would provide to them at the end of the contract. We set deadlines for those deliverables to be delivered, including the publication of the content. And we signed a contract, and we were ready to go. The trip was 4 days long. One thing I like to point out is that I don't care about hotels. Personally, I am an adventure blogger. I do not write about hotels ever. I write about outdoors activities only. It is the only thing I write about, and it's the only thing that my followers are interested in. So they put me up in this simple roadside hotel, just a basic place, because there was no reason to try and put me up in their nicest hotel. It wouldn't have any value for anyone, and I was fine with that. They gave me a rental car to give me the freedom to move around and explore the place on my own during the times that I wasn't out on activities they had scheduled. They planned the activities that we had discussed. They made appointments with me to do things like whitewater rafting, to have some guided hiking, to visit the local ski area and check it out, to go stand-up paddleboarding. But they also did something that I asked them to do. I told them that I really think that these small towns and these areas really come to life when you meet the quirky, interesting folks who live there that really just exemplify the area. You know, they know the history, they know everything about it, they lived there for their whole lives, and they're neat people. And I asked them just try and think of a few of those cool local people that really exemplify the area for you and introduce me to them. Set up a dinner so I can sit down and just talk with them about their home and learn about it from their perspective, to come up with ideas, to give it a personal, so that I could express this place through the story of people, because that's what stories are, you know. Place is not a story. Hiking is not a story. Rafting is not a story. People are stories. And it worked out really well. It turned out wonderfully. Our deliverables were 2 blog posts. 57, well, it was supposed to be 48. I ended up delivering 57 social media posts. I also provided 20 high-resolution photos of their choice from a selection of about 70 or 80 that they got to keep for their future marketing purposes. So the 2 blog posts, they produced 22,000 visitors that were within the target area they were trying to reach, being mostly drive-in traffic or a short flight away. Those people spent more than 1,900 hours viewing those posts. So that's an average of 5 minutes and 10 seconds per visitor reading these blog posts. Now, there is no really great way to create a perfect equivalent advertising value for this. But once you see what the total package cost, I think it's going to be pretty obvious that this was a pretty amazing deal for 1,900 hours of consumers viewing this content. Now that's just the blog posts. That's before the social media posts. They received more than 30,000 interactions on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Again, here's this big number reach. They had a reach of 160,000 plus. Don't really care for that number though, because it doesn't mean much, even though we always report it. And of course, they got their choice of 20 high resolution photos that I provided to them. Normally, when you hire a photographer, a good photographer, you're paying anywhere from $500 to $1,000, $2,000 per day for really good quality photos. I am not the best photographer in the world, but I've won a couple of awards. My photography is quite good. I would say it is certainly professional quality. And they got to select 20 photos. And when you consider the cost of hiring a photographer to come out for a 4-day shoot and what that would cost as a day rate plus travel, this turns out to be a really good deal. So these are some of the photos they got to choose from. And this package, I did not mention this at Arabian Travel Market, and this was several years ago. I would not charge this price for this package now. I did for them at that time, though. This cost in total for these results 1,900 hours of viewing time on the blog posts, 30,000 interactions on social media, 20 high-res photos. They paid $2,000 for that, plus my travel expenses. I think just the photos themselves, actually, probably would normally cost more than that. So, this is the kind of value that you can get from working with influencers. And now this was an example of a small-scale campaign. Just one guy going out, and that's a fairly small budget campaign. It was my travel expenses plus $2,000. Again, I'll stress, that was a few years ago. I was priced much lower than I am now, and then many influencers are now, because they're starting to realize, wow, we are providing a lot of value once you start adding these kinds of numbers up. This is the campaign that Nick was going to talk about. I wish I could tell you more about it, be familiar with it. I know it's been one of their biggest campaigns. They've run it since 2012. They bring in numerous travel bloggers into Bologna, Italy. They give them an apartment. They work with local tour operators to get these people out into activities that really fit their style and fit their niche that their audience is going to like. And they promote it to their fans and followers. Usually it yields incredible results because it's run, I think, during the entire summer for at least several weeks. And he's got some examples here. I wish I could tell you more about Blogville. You would have to go look at iAmbassador's website, which is iambassador.net, to find more information. Contact Nick directly. And, here you go. You can see the results of Blogville beginning all the way through to the following planning and buying season, and the amount of traffic that those articles started to pick up once people were searching for Bologna travel information. And I'm afraid I can't speak too much more for Blogville. So, to recap, please try to avoid these mistakes. Please try to appropriate your budget appropriately. Focus on the right numbers. Meet people. Speak to them face to face. Make sure you're hiring a professional. Make sure you're focusing on the engagement you're going to get and that you're hiring somebody who has an excellent brand fit for you, who is going to be able to convey your message to their audience without feeling fake or like they're just trying to sell something. Somebody it's a natural thing for. And above all, make sure you're getting a professional and that you're paying them appropriately for their services, because that's what most of these people are, at least the ones that we work with. And, and they are more than worth it once you start adding up all of these numbers. So, I hope you found this useful. If you found this useful, please sign up for our email newsletter or subscribe to our YouTube channel. You're going to see lots more of this content coming out over the next couple of years. And of course, if you have questions, please leave them in the comments below, or you can email us directly through the contact page on our website. So thanks very much for sticking through this long, boring discussion with me. And I hope that it helped you a little bit so that you can work better with influencers in the future.